That I knew you would be gone there. I knew you were buying a house.
Yeah, our house years was staying, trying to wait out. If it's a whole bunch of places until a lot of graduates. She graduates.
You're originally from, and where is he from? Kentucky. I never did ever meet him from my quarter. It's CLA, but it has to do with your job, honestly.
Yeah. So, my parents were with me.
Where it's good at church. That was in 97 or 2002. I lost my oldest brother from heart attack. He just turned 50. Then in 05, pancreatic cancer, 73. I was really kind of concerned about the heart attack part. Talked to my doctor at the VA, and he asked me their age is, they had a heart attack. It's too much of a once it got over that, his personality, he was not the same brother I He got what he was growing in. He was from my grandmother's house. He was growing on the fence. Taking the cross and selling. And that's what he said. I saw nothing more than shit. We got some there who had been sits on the fan with some smoke. So it's a heavy guy that's trying to put a profile. And I saw that. I was going to do this and they're not even E4 in less than 2 years. Here's the funny part. At the time, I was working out what they call A-game, all there. We get walk-in freezers, all that, anything that's refrigerator, service and diesels. I was learning and trade again. So I got another third class for what they should be together.
But we'd like to say good morning to y'all. Good place to be here this morning. God's house. We get settled in here. First of all, we'll ask, does anybody have a spoken prayer request? Okay, Steve. Ruby? Okay. Ronnie?
Continue to remember me and my family, remember my two brothers, and remember my mother.
Tim, I would keep my younger brother and my nieces and nephews in prayer. Because I know they're all false.
Any others this morning?
Still remember Pat Robertson, and I have a special unspoken, and remember our nation. Remember all the Richmonds.
Tim, of course, I always ask prayer for Tommy. Remember Amanda, she's working her first 16-hour shift today, so she has sent message to tell everyone at church hello. And I'd like for y'all to remember me. I'm going into my 4th week with an ear infection, and I've had about 5 different prescriptions, and nothing seems to be working, so
Okay.
appreciate your prayers.
Any others? Remember our niece, Amber, she had a baby yesterday and there's some complications. The little baby's name is Briella Elise, if I'm pronouncing that right. God knows who she is. Just pray for that little baby. She gets a special touch this morning. She needs it. Also, let's just be mindful of our services today and let's just pray for good fellowship, you know, and God's Spirit just guide, lead us. Pray for discernment of these scriptures as we go through them, you know, and He just kind of helps us to get a better understanding. You know, it's a difficult book, Revelation, and but today's lesson is interesting, and I think it's going to be a little easier to wade through some of this stuff than some of the prior ones I've had to deal with. So just ask for His will, you know, be done all throughout the day, right? This is the Lord's day, right?
Yeah.
Any other requests? All right, ask you to stand, please. And Luke, if you'd lead us out, please.
Father, we are so thankful. We pray for each and every one that's here today in this home. God, we're thankful today for just your blessings on all our lives, health and strength that you give us. Lord, as we come together, we know that there's a lot of needs and things that are sick and shut into the church. God, we just pray that you will continue to be with them, lift them up and strengthen them. God, we pray. We think of Sister Eileen, Sister Kathleen, Paul and Holt, we should be with them, Sister Sue. Just some of the others, God, that you would just be with them. We ask for your needs to be merciful unto our cry here today. As Tim had mentioned that baby, we pray for just a special touch there. We also pray for Matt, Jack, and Asher as they've been struggling with some health issues as well. We pray that you just watch over us. God, we pray. Forgive us in so many ways that we fail you. In Jesus' name.
So when we look at our title this morning, by the way, does anyone need a handout with today's lesson? Dakota, you got some? Okay, thank you, Jeff. From Heaven to Earth is the title, and what's that mean? What are they talking about? Well, we're going to get into that. But when I read over this lesson and seen what it was and studied it some, I thought of when you think of spiritual warfare, I want some thoughts here from you folks. What do you think of when someone mentions spiritual warfare? Can somebody tell me what comes to your mind when you hear that?
Battle for your soul between
Yeah.
faith and the Lord.
The battle for your soul, right? We have God's Spirit, don't we? But it's a constant battle because we have to fight the wiles of the devil, don't we? And it is a battle. Any other thoughts when you think about spiritual warfare? Well, today's lesson is going to show us where it all began. It's an interesting chapter. Chapter 12 is. It gets us in touch with something that we really don't see, but it's real. Okay, that's this warfare that's going on. It's a constant warfare that we're going to find out today in chapter 12, Revelations, that it's been in the universe since the fall of Satan, right? That's how far back this goes. And yes, John, when I thought of spiritual warfare, I thought about John's answer is exactly my thought, because we each have that experience in our walk, and it is a warfare. But where did it originate? You know, why is it here? You know, that's what chapter 12 kind of goes into, which I thought was kind of interesting when you look at it that way. This battle started in heaven, and that's, if you noticed our title, From Heaven to Earth, right? It's in the title. But it made its way to earth. Did Satan try to pervert the paradise of heaven with his pride he wanted? That rose up. He was cast out of the paradise of heaven. He was cast out along with how many of the angels? A third. 1/3. But thank goodness we have 2/3. We still have the majority, right? Working on our behalf. But you're right, sis. 1/3 of the angels were cast out with him. He was sent to earth, right? And where he drug Adam and Eve and humanity, for that matter, into the crosshairs of this battle that John says it's going on inside his being, right? Well, let's see how big this is now when we look at it from a macro perspective. So chapter 12 is a view, if you will, of that warfare that we've been talking about. Like other chapters in Revelation, there's a lot of symbolism here. Well, there is some symbolism, but I believe this lesson is pretty clear cut. The symbols we're going to see today, I think we'll all unanimously agree what they point to, okay? So in this chapter, like I said, it's a panoramic view of the spiritual warfare. This vision that John's seen was what looked into the past and into the future, if you will. And that's what we'll find out today. It looks at the fall of Satan all the way forward to the end of the Great Tribulation period, where he will be defeated, and we'll look at that. So it was an interesting lesson. I kind of enjoyed the study of this one. If you guys have any thought, like I always say, share it with us. This is like for everybody to participate. And if you have a thought, don't sit on it. Share it with us, and we'll go from there. So let's read the text. And it's kind of chopped up a little bit. They skip a few verses, and I'm just going to briefly go back into a few of these because I think they're relevant. But chapter 71 of your book, we're in Revelation 12. We're going to start at verse 1, and I'll read the first verse, and then you guys read after me. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars.
And she brought forth the ring out to listen to all nations on earth, and her child was caught up unto God, and to his throne.
Now we skip a few verses there, and later we'll go back and look at what we skipped, but I'll just go ahead and follow the literature. Verse 6, and the woman fled into the wilderness, where she hath place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days.
And there was war in heaven, Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon also his angels.
And prevailed not, neither was their place found any more in heaven.
And the great dragon was cast out, that whole serpent, called the devil, and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him.
And when the dragon saw that he was cast into the earth, he persecuted a woman which brought forth the man child.
And to the woman were given 2 wings of great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place, where she is nourished for a time, and half a time, from the face of the serpent.
And the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away of the flood.
And the earth held the woman, and the earth opened her mouth, and swallowed up the flood which the dragon cast out of his mouth.
And the dragon was wroth with the woman, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God, and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. All right. Amen. Okay, so let's go back to our first verse in our text here. And there appeared a great wonder. You know, John has seen a lot, okay, in this vision of Revelation. But here he says it's a great wonder. And obviously this was a great vision. But who is the woman? Who do we think this woman is? It says that she's clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet. Some say Virgin Mary. We found that. Some say it's the church. I disagree there, but the church did not give birth to Jesus, did it? Instead, Jesus birthed the church, didn't he? In my opinion. So I think the woman in this vision is the nation of Israel. Okay? And why do I say that? Well, there's clues right here in this very first verse. When you think about the sun, the moon, and the 12 stars. Y'all remember Joseph, not Bethlehem Joseph, Old Testament Joseph. Remember, he was the son of Jacob. Jacob had how many sons? 12, right? Okay, that's important. Remember this dream that his son Joseph had. He told, from Genesis 37, he told his parents and 11 brothers that the sun and the moon and all 11 stars would bow to him. Did he not? In the dream. So, what is another name for Jacob? Israel. Remember that? Okay. So you see how this ties together now. Jacob, or Israel, is the sun in this description in John's vision of the woman. Rachel, the mother, is the moon. And of course, the 11 brothers of Joseph, add Joseph, that's your 12 stars. Right? That is the nation of Israel. So if you look at it from that way, you talked about symbolism. So much symbolism in Revelation. I believe we can agree what this symbol is, right? What the woman represents. She is the nation. And there was other, let's see, what else do I have in my notes here? Yeah, we know that Jacob was the patriarch of the nation. The woman in the vision is absolutely is Israel. You know, there's so much, when we think about Israel too, there is so much writing concerning Israel and end times. There's a lot of that in the Bible as well. Israel will play a significant role in the end times. It's in other places. Jesus spoke about it himself, how the Jews would be affected in certain ways. Daniel wrote about a lot of the Jewish turmoil that would happen at the end time. So anyway, so when we think about Israel now, I think it's worth mentioning from a historical standpoint, right up to modern times. They've been attacked. They have been hated. They have been despised more than any people on earth. Have they not? Exactly. But yet they still exist. Not just exist, but they thrive, don't they? So when I think about Israel and historically, right up to, we'll use Hitler, in 586 BC, the Babylonians came in, destroyed them, took them into captivity, destroyed their land. In 70 AD, Romans came in, destroyed them again, what was rebuilt. Massacred at the time, this was a big number back then, estimated 1.6 million Jews at that time, Romans did. In 135 AD, Romans come back, they hit them hard again. Think about the thousands of years of disbursement where people left that country and scattered all over the world. But yet, they're still strong. No one wants to mess with that country, do they? Yeah. Yeah, they sure did. They became an independent nation. And then the 6 million Jews in World War II that Ruby talked about. So, how they have been hassled, oppressed, but still exist today. So when you think about that, why? Why are they still standing? Why are they still strong? Didn't God make certain promises with this people? That's right.
They are God's chosen people. That's why they'll never be annihilated.
Yeah.
Or wiped off the face of this earth.
Yeah. Interesting. In my study, I didn't write this in my notes, but I vaguely remember it. I was looking at something, and there was a government official in England who was, it could have been the Queen, and she asked one of her statesmen, give me proof that there's God. And he said, look at the Jew. Everything they've been through, you know. Thought that was interesting. Now our text skips verses 2, 3, and 4. So we know at this point that John has seen the woman, okay, and we're pretty sure that this is Israel. And in verse 5 it says, she brought forth a man-child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up into God and to his throne. Okay, who's the child? Jesus. This is pretty easy one to decipher here. We go back to the symbolism. This child is Jesus. And we know, as John states, he did ascend back to the Father, didn't he? Just like he says here in this verse. So that's established. The child is Jesus. And in verse 6, well, real quickly, we skip 2, 3, and 4. And I think it's worth mentioning just real quick. What did we miss? We're talking about the woman with child in verse 2. And she being with child cried, travailing in birth and pain to be delivered. Verse 3, and there appeared another wonder in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon. Not in our text, but this is Satan. Okay, more symbolism. Having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns upon his head. And his tail drew third part of the stars of heaven. Remember, 1/3 of his angels, of God's angels, joined forces with Satan when Satan was cast out. And it says, and did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman which is ready to be delivered, for to devour her child, Jesus, remember, as soon as it was born. So I just wanted to look back at that. The devil is on a mission here. He's after the man-child birthed by the nation Israel, and this is Jesus. And then verse 6, and the woman fled into the wilderness where she had place prepared of God, and they should feed her there 1,260 days. So we look at verses 5 and 6. Verse 5, it's Jesus. Verse 6, this dragon, Satan, is desiring to devour the child as soon as it was born, it said. Pursued by this dragon, she flees into the wilderness. God has secured a safe place where she will hide in safety, it says, for 1,260 days or 3.5 years. This is the middle of the 7-year tribulation period, okay? This last 3.5 years of the 7-year tribulation is starting right here. This is the middle of the tribulation period. When we think about, Daniel wrote a lot concerning this as well. In Matthew, we're talking about now the nation of Israel, that remnant we talked about earlier, is now running, okay? Is now running, and they're being pursued here. And Daniel wrote about it in Matthew, and Jesus quoted some scripture of Daniel's from Matthew 24. Jesus said, "When you see the abomination spoken by Daniel, then flee as fast as you can to the wilderness." And right here it is, it's mentioned again. She's fleeing. Any thoughts so far? So this is a violent tribulation, obviously. The remnant of Israel is running to safety. That's what John is visualizing with. That's what he is seeing in this vision. And there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels. So now in the middle of this tribulation period, a war breaks out in heaven, it tells us. But wait, wasn't Satan cast out? He still had access occasionally. Remember Job, chapter 1? Satan is in heaven, was he not? And he asked God about his servant Job. Remember they had a conversation. So I think that, yes, Satan was cast out on the original fall, but he occasionally had access. And here it is again. A war broke out in heaven, it says. So he's back there. And there's this epic battle. If you read it, good angels versus the bad angels, is what it sounds like here. And I also thought it's interesting. That we got to the role. I don't want to use the word appreciate. I don't appreciate the devil. But we have to be cognizant and aware of his power, right? But did you notice in this scripture, this battle is not between God and the devil. That would be no battle. There would be no competition, right? But it was Michael and the dragon that fought. I thought that was interesting. I don't want to put Satan on God's level. I don't think we should have that mindset that, it's God versus Satan. Well, one-on-one, there is no battle there. It would, God would just speak him out, and he would just vaporize, I guess. I don't know if he wanted to, right? I thought that was interesting. It's not God versus the devil. That would be no contest. This is a battle, it said. To me, a battle means there's actually was a struggle, right? So it's Satan, I think, and Michael and their armies. Anyway, what's your thoughts? Any ideas so far? You got this big battle breaking out in heaven. You're in the middle of tribulation in earth. Yes.
This is Cliff's terminology, but the Bible talks about Satan going before the throne accusing the brethren day and night.
Yeah.
So we know that he does have that.
Yep, he does. That's exactly right. Up to this point, he did. And then something's going to flip here in a little bit, I believe.
I often wondered who that woman was that had been running under her feet and stuff.
Well, that woman was a vision that John had, Bruce, and she symbolized and represented the nation of Israel.
Oh.
Yeah. Verse 8, it says, we're talking about the battle. We have Michael fighting the dragon, and their angels are fighting each other. In verse 8, they prevailed not, neither was their place found any more in So, to Cliff's point, the devil had access, but that's getting ready to get shut down now. You know, that he won't have any future access from here on, I don't think. Verse 9, and the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, was deceiver of the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. Okay, so now I believe he's cast out permanently. Okay? He has no more access. Remember, he took 1/3 of the angels with him. They joined him in that rebellion. These are his angels. Like I said earlier, what's good for us, 2/3. We got the 2/3 majority, don't we, of the good angels. Satan only got 1/3 of them. But go back to our title, From Heaven to Earth. Now, for those ones left through the rest of the tribulation, it's going to get a whole lot worse. Because Satan now knows all he's got left is that remnant to chase after, and any that come to God during the tribulation. You know, he's going to go after them hard, isn't he? That's where his focus is now, because he knows that his defeat awaits him. So let's take out everybody. Let's take out as many as we can. Isn't that how he works? He knows he's beat, don't he? He just tries to drag as many with him as he possibly can. He is, again, it's not about him. He's persistent though, right? He's persistent. So he attacks those now that are still left down here. And it said, I believe at this point the church has already been taken. I mean, that's a different lesson. I don't want to really get into that. But anyway, verse 13, and when the dragon saw that he was cast into the earth, he persecuted the woman. Remember, here now he's going after God's people even stronger than he did ever, because he's focused now. He's mad. He says he persecuted a woman, which brought forth the man child. So basically, Satan attacks the Jewish people. He's been defeated in heaven. We just saw that. He's been cast down to earth. No more access to heaven. He's fuming, isn't he? You know, it's like a last wave of anti-Semitism that's going to be brutal. It's going to hit the remnant of God's people. But we just also understand that she's running now into the wilderness, into some protection. We read that earlier. He hates Israel because, as we know, because since the time of Abraham, Israel holds a crucial role in redemption, does it not, of the world, and in Satan's defeat. That seed that will come from the nation will save the world. Verse 14, and to the woman were given 2 wings. Here's deliverance now. Remember, God's people always find deliverance. And to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place where she is nourished for a time and times, and half a time from the face of a serpent. When I read this, 2 wings of a great eagle, you know, we can only imagine what John saw. Some people saw this as transport aircraft, maybe moving the Jewish people to a safer country, because, you know, Satan's bearing down on these armies of the evil doers and just right on their tail. It could have been. I'm not going to say, I don't know. But that's what some believe it could be. But regardless, wings of an eagle have been mentioned before in deliverance of God's people. Exodus 19:4, it's mentioned regarding the deliverance from the Egyptians. He says, I bear you on eagle's wings and brought you unto myself. So eagle's wings are a symbolism of God's rescue. You know, God safety. They didn't come out of Egypt on their own, did they? They didn't have the means to do that. They came out because God brought them out. And eagle's wings have become a symbol, if you will, to them. So, and this is, here we go again. And John's seen it in his vision. In this great tribulation, just like versus the Egyptians, the Israelites cannot deliver themselves. Right? But God can. Right? And that's what we see here. Into the wilderness, it says, into her place. There was lots of discussions of where this place is. That's not really important. The key here is God's going to protect them. Right? Where she is nourished, it said. Don't that kind of remind you of the past when he delivered them out of Egypt? Didn't he nourish them? Remember the manna from heaven? God's going to intervene here just like he did back then and take care of that remnant, take care of that, of his people. (15 and 16 is just more descriptive about this pursuit, if you will, of the serpent after God's people. And the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away of the flood. And the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened her mouth and swallowed up the flood which the dragon cast out of his mouth. So again, the devil is enraged. He's focused now on this group of people because that's his last target he has. Things are winding down, so to speak. So he's coming after him with everything he's got. This army is so persistent that John says it's like a flood coming after him. But what happens? Again, that protection. God's people were protected. Only to be swallowed up by the earth. What was that? Was that a big earthquake? Was that just a large sinkhole that, where they came in underneath the pursuing army and just buried them? Again, it sounds a lot like, remember the Red Sea when they got through and then the waters came back in? He did it before, didn't he? He'll do it again. He'll protect his people. He'll give them safe passage to safety. Isaiah touched on this, what we just read in chapter 59:19. He said, when the army comes in like a flood, remember John just said, pursued them like a flood, didn't it? The Spirit of the Lord will lift up a standard against them. Verse 17, and the dragon was wroth with the woman and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. We're moving through this pretty quick because you all won't help me. The devil in his rage now targets, I picked up on something now, there's two groups of people mentioned here in 17. It says that the woman, right? We know who that is, we just talked about it. And the remnant of her seed. Well, what's different? Well, we know this is towards the end of the tribulation, okay? I think the woman, obviously, I think we established that as Israel. The rest of her offspring, could this be Gentiles that come to faith during the tribulation? It could be. Again, we got this imagery here and these symbols, and we have to decipher those. But I believe that's what that is. Because you remember what's going to happen with the Antichrist? There's going to be those that will not bow to him, right? They're going to be pursued just like the Jews, correct? So I think there's going to be this. I think they're protected here as well. It's just Tim's But anyway, they refuse to submit to the Antichrist. They refuse, so they're going to be protected as well. Anyway, anybody got any thoughts? Anything to add? I kind of went through this pretty fast, but anything to add?
Tim, I can only imagine the wars that are gonna go on in this time.
Yeah.
Are gonna be something we've never seen.
Yes, sis.
We've been studying on Wednesday nights in the middle school group a lot of the Old Testament, and we've been really trying to concentrate on this remnant because it mentions it several times. I'm not even sure how many times,
Yeah.
but we've run into it several times,
Yeah.
and just trying to get prepared for how it plays out in the New Testament. It's been really interesting.
It is. It is an interesting concept, but it is real. What I take away from me is, and John kind of opened up the thought, because when I thought of spiritual warfare, I just thought about how it affects me individually. You know, it is a warfare. But this chapter showed us where it all began, you know, what started it all. And it took us to where it's going to end as well, you know. But I thought that was interesting. It's a panoramic view, if you will, of this war between good and evil. Its beginning, its origins, and how it's going to end with Satan being... now, we didn't go to the end of Satan's final demise. That's later on, and I didn't look ahead to see what Mark's got next week. But when I think about chapter 12, a couple things come to mind. Number one, there will be continued warfare until Satan is defeated. Okay? Number two, there also will continue to be protection and provisions and victory with God, right? Also, it wasn't in our text. They skipped some things here, but I thought verse 11 was an interesting verse, and I'd just like to read it real quick. And they overcame him. This is those tribulation saints, okay? I didn't want to go off into a verse about that, to a separate lesson, but it's in chapter 12. And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. And they loved not their lives unto death. So, if we can look into the future of how those tribulation saints came through the blood of the Lamb, everybody has that opportunity today, don't they? So the blood of the Lamb is the difference. Any others? I'm just about wrapped up here, I believe.
You know, Tim, I'm not an expert by no means on, but I have figured this out. And you cannot just get in the book of Revelations and read and ever understand unless you get into the Old Testament.
Yep, that's right.
Because they tie hand in hand
They
together.
do. Yeah.
And you basically said, and we do know that in Revelations it's going to be like the Old Testament again, the
Yeah.
sacrifices and stuff will
Yeah.
continue. And they're just waiting on that temple to be built because they can start performing
Yeah.
those sacrifices again.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate everybody's attention and your comments.